So in part one of this video, we ended when we got into the civilian casualties from World War II. And you guys were asking me to finish the video, and I agree that it's really important to do so. It's just, it's one thing to hear about it and learn about it in school, and then to actually see like the visual representation of what was actually happening. Like, it just makes it that much more real. But hello, my favorite people. This is part 2 of the fallen of World War II. Subscribe to me here, like the video. Get me to 10K on Instagram. I think we're like at 7,000 almost. And check out the Patreon too for more unedited and unfiltered reactions. My energy's a bit heavier this video because I'm anticipating what I'm about to see. Here we go.
The Holocaust also includes non-Jewish deaths.
So
Between
gypsies,
130,000 to
disabled.
500,000 Roma, then called gypsies, were killed. The numbers are disputed. About a quarter million.
The way of thinking. Also, let me just preface this because I got some complaints last video. This is a reaction. There's commentary. I'm not just reposting someone else's video and making it seem like it's my content. I have commentary. That's why it's a reaction. So if you don't like pausing, don't watch reactions. However, what was the thinking behind the Germans and like who they targeted? Like, what was the problem with the gypsies that they saw? What was the issue with all these different like denominations of people? They just didn't like people who they thought weren't perfect. At the end of the day, being imperfect is what makes a human being perfect, in my opinion. So what was up with the Germans? If you're German, like present day German, let me know what the thinking was for. I don't get it. The ideology from back then. What was going on?
Are disputed. About a quarter million people with disabilities were killed. Homosexuals, Catholics, and other groups were also exterminated.
The gays?
But their numbers were relatively small. Some
Why'd they kill the
historians
gays?
say that other civilian deaths should go under the label of Holocaust. About 2 million non-Jewish Poles were killed under German occupation. Some of which were sent to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. When you combine civilian and military deaths, over 16% of the total Polish population died in World War II, which is the highest percentage of any
Poland.
country. But not the
Why
highest in
Poland
total
so
death
bad?
count. The Soviet Union again tops that list, losing at least as many civilians as it did soldiers. Somewhere between...
Wow. They lost as many civilians as they did soldiers in the Soviet Union. And isn't the Soviet Union credited for being one of the biggest reasons that Germany lost the war? Or the Axis powers lost the war? And they had the most casualties. So they really suffered the most, I think. No. The people who died in the Holocaust and such suffered the most. And then I would say the Soviet Union people.
But not the highest in total death count. The Soviet Union again tops that list, losing at least as many civilians as it did soldiers. Somewhere between 10 and 20 million.
That's
a particularly dark moment for the Soviet Union was the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg.
German forces surrounded Leningrad before civilians could be evacuated.
Please,
Supplies, including food, were cut off for 2.5 years.
2 years? Not only is this like a learning opportunity for history in World War II, but this is really a chance to freaking appreciate where you are and your life right now. Imagine 2 years, no food, no water, like just supply. You can't even, you have no life, really. The life you knew is no longer yours. Like, I am really blessed to be born in America. As much as I shit on it, and yeah, we have our faults like healthcare and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, I am blessed to be here. Because I don't think there would ever be a time when something like that would happen to our country. 2 years blocked off by the Germans. Oh my God. That is so sad.
1.5 million people died as a result, mostly from starvation, mostly civilians.
And that's a slow death.
Stalin's cruelty towards his own people is partly responsible for these numbers.
What?
He often didn't allow civilians to evacuate from cities, thinking it would cause the soldiers protecting them to fight harder. About a million...
No, that's fucked up. Stalin, you're a psycho. What kind of thinking is that? No, I will make my people suffer to make my soldiers fight harder. That's like motivation for them to see their people suffering. That's so sadistic and like just gross. Who comes up with that? That is like the same mentality I feel like Hitler was using for why he wanted to get rid of all these people. People have some backwards thinking. And how do these people end up in positions of power? Like, you are cuckoo.
Evacuate from...
Hell, we elected Trump. Not me. I didn't. Yeah. Politics don't make sense.
Cities, thinking it would cause the soldiers protecting them to fight harder. About 1 million Soviets died in Stalin's own labor camps, called the Gulag.
He had his own labor camps for his own people? Stalin?
Especially countries who were invaded. While many died as a result of so-called collateral damage, the biggest numbers occurred when it was no else. Civilians were exterminated, purposely fired upon or bombed, used as human shields, or intentionally deprived of food. The intentional killing of civilians was done by most warring parties, including the United Kingdom and the United States.
Wait, whoa! What? See, here I am, I'm not gonna lie, here I am judging. I'm thinking like, oh, freaking Russia, Soviet Union, pieces of crap back then. Germany, pieces of crap back then. Here he is saying the UK did it. Well, hello, they are coined for the creation of slavery, so not really surprised there. But the United States was involved too doing... When the heck were we using... There's no way we used our own civilians. Probably foreign civilians, which is still just as bad. But that's crazy. People are using civilians as like shields, purposely shooting them. It's like, I guess, at war, just empathy and morality goes out the window. But at that point, once you do that, I feel like you've completely lost all of humanity. Like, there's no reason for humanity anymore, or society. Once you can really say, okay, I'm going to use this body of people as a shield, or like as ammunition to catapult another cause or whatever, like at that point, all is lost. That is so sad.
The United Kingdom was spared of a land invasion, but still lost 60,000 civilians, largely from German air raids or blitzes, often directed at civilian population centers.
Like London,
The UK
right?
did the same to German cities at a much greater magnitude, causing about 10 times the number of deaths.
So the UK used to be known for like their naval base, but apparently they're really good at Air Force too, and like dropping bombs on people.
Most German civilian deaths came from the ground at the late stage of the war. When the Nazi regime collapsed, civilians living in occupied regions had to desperately flee from the advancing
Nazis
Soviet
fail?
army.
Like, how do we finally end them?
Rapes were widespread.
Wait, what? Did he say the R word?
Desperately flee from the advancing Soviet army. Rapes were widespread, and death estimates.
I'm so... No, he did say it. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Wait. Is this like a thing where in the 1950s a certain words means a different thing than it does nowadays? I pray it does. I pray. What do you mean R word was widespread? People were just out here in the streets R-ing people? Fucking sick.
Desperately flee from the advancing Soviet army. Rapes were widespread, and death estimates ranged from 600,000 to 3 million. Let's step back and see where we are with the totals.
What about the gays? The rainbow's there.
We just
Talk
counted
about
about 20 million civilian deaths in Europe.
Just in Europe.
If you add this to the European military deaths we already covered, it brings us to over 40 million.
All this bloodshed for what? For what?
Then we have the Asian theater. Here we see the vast majority of military deaths in Asia came from China and Japan. On the civilian side, about 6 million deaths from China, Indonesia, Korea, Indochina, and the Philippines can be attributed to Japanese war crimes, which are sometimes compared to the Nazi atrocities.
100%, which is why we dropped a freaking bomb on them.
Due to the sheer scale of the cruelty. China had the second highest death count after the Soviet Union. And like the Soviets, the Chinese government demonstrated a stunning willingness to sacrifice its own people. Chinese nationalists opened the dike at the Yellow River, hoping the flood would halt the Japanese advance. 500,000 Chinese civilians or more.
What about the people living there? And I feel like this is also why current times America and China beef so much and just will never get along. Because again, if you're, like, as much as I fault our government and our society and our need for like socialist reform, I guess you could say, for certain things, I could never see our government opening freaking the coast and letting it just swarm our own civilians. I could never see them doing that. But China, in a way to keep the Japanese out, said, let us flood people, our own people. That is so sick.
Which is 2 or 3 times the number who died in all countries in the 2004 Asian tsunamis.
Wow.
But the invasion of China only cost Japan 200,000 soldiers. Most were killed fighting the US and allies in the Pacific War.
I want to see war footage though, like them talking on the radios, that kind of stuff too.
Were caused by American firebombing and the 2 nuclear attacks. Contrary to official US statements, these airstrikes were directed at civilian populations, not military targets.
America, did we ever answer for that? I feel like everyone's committing war crimes and we all deserve, at least I hope, actually, I say it like this is common, or modern times, I mean. I hope that everyone had some sort of like, okay, you did this, shame on you, you did that, shame on you, and we all do something. We got Eurovision out of it, but we need something more.
When you add all the deaths outside Europe, it brings us to a grand total of 70 million for the war.
70 million people!
Depending on who's counting, and what civilian deaths get included.
All the people that aren't even accounted for.
More people died in World War II than in any other war in history. For comparison, here are 20 or so of the very worst wars and atrocities we have on record.
Okay, we've got to literally go through every single one. I've been saying, the last video we did, or a couple videos back, it was World War I we were talking about, and it said that World War I was the 6th deadliest war. So all these wars that are on the screen, we got to learn the history of them, like the Atlantic slave trade. That may hit a bit too close to home, and a lot of my audience is British, so I can already tell it's going to be a war just in my comment section. We've got the American Indians. I learned about that in school, still to this day, feel sick about that. Russian troubles. The only troubles I know is the Scottish people versus the UK and the English people. 30 Years' War. Never heard of it, but a war went on for 30 years. It's crazy. Fall of the Ming Dynasty. I love the dynasty and things like that, or like Romans and things like that. I like that. Rebellion. So basically all these we got to check out.
Some of these are more of atrocities than wars, but
Napoleon,
we've seen how that distinction can get
Short
blurred.
King.
Some of these spanned across centuries. World War II had the highest body count, and it all happened in just 6 years.
In 6 years.
The world's population has grown significantly since the earliest atrocities on this list.
Damn, the Mongols were out here being ridiculous. 40 million, what were they doing out here? Same as the Mao. Jesus Christ. The An Lushan Revolt, 36 million died. What are they revolting against?
If you want to compare them in terms of what percentage of the world died, we can adjust the chart to look like this. This rough approximation tells us there may have been more devastating wars before World War II, proportionally speaking.
Okay. So there were more people back in the day? Or less people back in the day? And more dead?
When we turn to post-war conflicts, it's hard to say anything that isn't controversial. But the data shows something quite extraordinary has been happening.
We're desensitized?
In 1989, John Gaddis coined the phrase the long peace to identify the absence of conflict between the nuclear powers during the Cold War. 25 years later, the Cold War is over, and the term is still being used, although its meaning may have shifted.
So
European countries have not fought each other, except for this 10-day war.
Motherfucking Russia broke the streak.
In 1956, when the Soviet Union invaded Hungary.
No, because it is always Russia. Back then the name was Soviet Union, but it's still the same. What's wrong with them? They're always like, sit down. They didn't have discipline growing up. What? I don't get it. What's their issue?
When we look at European wars before World War II,
it's been decades and they're still acting up.
They tend to be more frequent as you go back, though smaller in scale. And the largest 44 economies of the world have not battled each other since World War II.
Good.
Rich countries have fought poorer countries.
USA, number
like
one!
the US versus Iraq.
Ooh, that was literally just a war for oil.
But rich countries have not fought other rich countries. Such a period of peace between the so-called great powers hasn't been seen since the Roman Empire.
I think it's because we're all kind of scared of each other, and like we know what each other are capable of, and we never want to bring that we never want to bring that forward. And also, like, I think since World War I, we've seen what war can do, and obviously no one wants to repeat that unless it's like Russia and China.
To many, peace is too strong of a word. Wars have occurred since World War II, and they can be grouped into these 4 categories. We don't see colonial wars anymore. We've already noted that interstate wars between rich countries have not occurred at all. And here we see wars involving smaller economies have tapered off.
The Black Lives
That
Matter
leaves civil wars
situation in January 6th,
and without
that was a
foreign
civil
intervention.
war, kinda.
And this is what these battle deaths look like alongside of World War II. More people died fighting in World War II than in all the wars since. And again, we can't forget about world population, which has almost tripled since World War II.
Oh, wow.
If we scale these numbers to show deaths
People
in
are
proportion to world population, showing the likelihood that a person on Earth dies in battle, the downward trend becomes even more pronounced. Now, this isn't to infer anything about why this trend is occurring. That's a discussion for another day.
Tell me why you think.
Interact with this chart to explore what conflicts are behind the totals. Now, bearing is a difficult thing to measure. It's a bit like counting the people who didn't die in wars that never happened. We give such importance to the word peace, but we don't tend to notice it when it occurs or report on it. Sometimes it takes reminding ourselves of how terrible war once was to see the peace that has been growing around us.
And to want it to keep going.
Of course, this trend may not continue, and it's not clear how looking at these charts can help us make the right decisions to ensure that it does.
No, that's really nice.
But the longer the long
Let's zoom
piece
into
grows,
time.
the more significant it becomes. So if watching the news doesn't make us feel hopeful about where things are heading,
It doesn't. The news is full of negative
watching
stuff.
the numbers might.
Yeah. This guy, you're a poet, my guy. And then let the ambient music play. That's a nice edit. Oh, it's over. I loved how he talked about how though we're still at peace, like being at peace for so long makes us appreciate it more. And you would think that in the news that would be exemplified more, but it's not. And since it's not, at least maybe this video and him reminding you of that peace can bring you some solace and make you have hope for the future. I like how, though this video was very dark and talked about some really heavy stuff, in the end we still ended with hope. And like hope for humanity. Hope that nothing like World War II will occur again. And the importance of like doing videos like this is, what's the saying? I have no idea who coined it. But they're like, if you don't learn about history, you are destined to repeat it. So I think videos like this one and doing reactions like this and like refreshing my brain on history is really important. That way I can go out into the world, and whether I'm on YouTube and sharing my videos with thousands of people, or I'm, in the workforce working as a nurse, like I am able to influence and maybe perpetually help the world somehow. I don't know, influence something. But I'm glad that we finished the video. And again, almost 100 million people died in World War II. And again, my question is, for what? Literally for what? Like, we went to Afghanistan, started a whole war with the Middle East because we wanted their oil. What was the point of World War II? What did Hitler want? What does Russia want? What does China want? What did the Japanese want? Why were they even going so crazy? So many questions that, like, what was the domino effect, I guess? What caused World War II to happen? I guess that could be the next thing we look into. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like, subscribe, check out the Instagram, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.